Hey, Shavua Tov. So this week's parsha starts with the woman who gives birth, Mazel Tov. She's impure for 7 days, and on the 8th day they have the circumcision. But what this parsha is really about is Shabbos, is the Sabbath. It's hiding beneath the surface. How so? Well, let's start by asking a few questions. The circumcision is done on the 8th day. Why? Why not on the 7th day? After all, isn't the Sabbath the 7th day? Don't we have 7 years in the Shemitah cycle? Isn't 7 the big number for holy things? A bride and groom who get married celebrate for 7 days and recite 7 benedictions. 7 seems to be the lucky number. So why is a bris milah done on the 8th day? So there are a couple of explanations. One of them is an explanation of consideration, meaning that we just said that the woman is impure for 7 days, and if they'd have the bris on the 7th day, she'd still be impure. And that would mean that the father and mother are going to be sad while everybody else is happy. So it seems like we're saying, out of consideration for their feelings, we will do it on the 8th day when she is pure and when everybody, especially the parents, can rejoice. That seems to be a little odd that we would make a mitzvah and set the time for it based on just consideration of some people's feelings. It's not a bad thing, but it seems to be not the most imposing reason. It seems to be somewhat of a lighter reason. Is there more to it? We will see that indeed there is. Now, there's also something very fascinating, and that is that a circumcision supersedes the Sabbath. If there is a bris, that the 8th day is on Shabbos, we do it even though that performance of the bris involves certain of the Sabbath forbidden labors. And that also needs to be explained. You see how the Sabbath is really coming in here. That also needs to be explained because I might think that it shouldn't supersede the Sabbath. For example, we have the mitzvah of tefillin, the phylacteries, which we do not wear on the Sabbath. Why? Because the phylacteries are called a sign, an oat. And the Sabbath is called a sign. It's called an oat. And we would say that if a person wears tefillin on Shabbos, it's as if they're saying that the sign of the Sabbath isn't strong enough, and that would be disrespectful to the Sabbath. For this reason, it is forbidden, not just not required, it is forbidden to wear tefillin on the Sabbath. So I might think the same should apply, maybe even more so, to a circumcision, because a circumcision is an oath, it's a sign, it's also called a brit, a covenant. Well, the Sabbath is also called a sign and a covenant. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat la'asot et Shabbat l'dorotam brit olam. They will keep the Sabbath for their generations, a eternal covenant. Oti, it is a sign for them. So therefore it is a sign and a covenant, which is what Brit Milah is. So if I make a Brit Milah on the Sabbath, maybe I am also denigrating the sign and the covenant of the Sabbath, and maybe I shouldn't be allowed to do that. But no, I'm required to do it. Why the difference? I believe that the answer to these questions really points out how the Jew is supposed to live their life, and most importantly, how the Jew is to approach the Sabbath. The Sabbath is the most potentially powerful and potent commandment we have. It is called Me'ein Olam Haba, the taste of the world to come. How can we enhance our Sabbath and learn from the Sabbath to really have that experience every single week? So let's take a look at Jacob, our forefather. He had a dream, and in his dream he saw a ladder. The ladder was planted on the earth, and its top was reaching to the heavens. And then the angels were going up and down, and then God was standing above the ladder in heaven. I believe that that ladder symbolizes how the Jew is supposed to live their life. The ladder is connected to the ground. This is the physical world within which we live. Our job is to climb that ladder as high as we can, and when we get to the very top of the ladder, we can look beyond and see into heaven. 7, the number 7, symbolizes perfection in this world. There is also the concept of faith. The Sabbath encapsulates the idea of faith. Why is 7 and faith and perfection in this world all wrapped up into one? Well, there is a simple explanation about the nature of the number 7. You have 6 directions: north, south, east, west, up and down. They may seem discrete, they may seem disconnected, even random. And the one who does not believe, the atheist, the heretic, believes indeed that the world is full of randomness. But when I have the 7th point, which is the point in the center which connects them all, that is God. That is God exercising his control over all of creation. All of the things that seem random and disconnected indeed are truly connected, coming from one source, from one creator. And that is the idea of the Sabbath and the sabbatical year. And that means completion in this world, faith in this world. But there is also the heavens. That's beyond the natural world. L'ma'ala min hateva, above nature, if you will. And that's the number 8. That's what the Brit Milah comes to symbolize. And we have this same idea that standing on the top of the ladder, I look towards heaven. The next step is already in heaven where there is Hashem. And we have an example of this in our calendar coming right up very soon. The holiday of Passover is connected to the holiday of Shavuot through a mitzvah called counting the Omer. We count 7 weeks. So there's your 7. But we don't celebrate Shavuot at the end of the 7 weeks. We celebrate it on the 50th day, which is after the 7 is over. Because what happened on Shavuot? The heavens opened, and God came down and gave us the Torah. And so therefore we see that the Jew lives and thrives by getting to the top of that ladder and looking up towards heaven and yearning and aspiring to reach that heavenly level where God comes down and gives us the Torah, where God is present in the world. So the Sabbath is connected to the physical. It's the ladder. It's the very top of the ladder. And from the top of the ladder, we are looking towards heaven. But the circumcision is one step beyond. It is already touching heaven. It is already touching Jewish destiny. You will notice that the circumcision is performed on the part of the anatomy that is responsible for the creation of future generations. That is the aspiration of the Jewish people. And so there's a beautiful, beautiful explanation as to why the circumcision must be on the 8th day, not the 7th, and that is because the baby must experience a Sabbath before they have the Brit Milah. They must experience that moment of faith. They must experience that moment of standing on top of the ladder and looking towards heaven. Even though they're just a baby and maybe not cognitively aware, spiritually they are certainly aware, and we want the baby to have had a Sabbath under his belt, so to speak, before he comes to the Brit Milah. And to add to that connection, we asked, why is the circumcision superseding the Sabbath? That we actually perform a circumcision on the Sabbath, we perform a circumcision on the Sabbath, say that 10 times fast, even though it involves violating Sabbath law. There's a reason for that too. And it's not like tefillin, which we don't do. We don't say that it's denigrating the sign and the covenant of the Sabbath. The reason given is as follows. Because Sabbath is a uniquely Jewish thing. It is only meant for the nation of Israel. A non-Jew who keeps the Sabbath, say the rabbis, is chayav mita. It deserves death at the hands of heaven. It's considered a very sin. They're stealing something which is unique to the relationship between Israel and God. It's almost a form of adultery. That's why when a person comes to convert to Judaism, they are told, before they actually go through with the actual ceremony, that every Sabbath they must do at least one forbidden labor so that they don't keep Sabbath. Why is that important? We have it in our tefillah, in our prayer on Shabbos morning. We say, V'gam min benuchato lo yishkenu arelim. In his rest, the uncircumcised do not have a dwelling. So the baby who's born and is not yet circumcised is certainly Jewish. And if they never would get circumcised, they still would have to keep the Sabbath. So that's different than being a non-Jew. Nonetheless, being uncircumcised somehow interferes with the full impact of the Sabbath. We have a rule, for example, of pikuach nefesh, that if somebody is in mortal danger, we violate the Sabbath in order to save their life. What's the reason for that? Because we say, violate one Sabbath for this Jew so that they will keep many Sabbaths into the future. By one act of violation of the Sabbath to save a life, we are actually enhancing Sabbath observance by having another Jew in the world who's keeping it week in and week out. The same kind of logic goes here as well. In order to enhance the Sabbath experience of this newborn on their Bris day, we give them the Bris even on Shabbos, so that that particular Shabbos, which is their second Shabbos, because if it comes out on Shabbos means they were born on Shabbos, is their second Shabbos, they already are experiencing it not as an uncircumcised, but rather as a circumcised junior member of the Jewish community. So we see there is a relationship between circumcision and the Sabbath as well. And this is why I believe it is so important that the mother and father be rejoicing at the Bris. Because the Bris is not just a ceremony that they're invited to. It is their mitzvah. It is their mitzvah of bringing the Jewish future. It is their mitzvah of standing at the top of that ladder and having their baby, holding that baby up above that ladder, touching heaven with that baby as he has the Brit Milah, as he rises above the limitations of the natural world. We have to know that our job is to be that ladder. And so therefore they have to be in an exquisitely happy mood. They cannot be tmeim. She cannot be impure, because impurity is being imprisoned by the material. It is death. It is depression. And that is no position and no situation where one can see the heaven at the top of the ladder. But when she reaches the top of the ladder and becomes pure, then all of a sudden the horizon opens and the light shines. We even find this by Yaakov Avinu. The Yaakov struggled through the night with the man being the angel, as we know the story. And only in the morning, when he got up to the top of that ladder and the heaven opened and the light came, then the angel could do no harm to Yaakov, and Yaakov becomes Yisrael, somebody who prevails against angels and men, or God and gods and men, as it were, Elokim v'anashim, whatever that means, something beyond the limitations of nature. So this is the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day when we stand at the top of the ladder and we look towards heaven and see the brilliant future that we enhance by bringing our children into the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the Sabbath is a great protection for the nation of Israel, but it is teaching us that we have to be living our lives in the physical world, but knowing that our direction is up to the top of that ladder and seeing heaven, no matter what forces may be pushing against us at any given moment. Never to lose faith. Sabbath is about faith, because we see from the top of that ladder that God will bring the redemption and there will be a heavenly kingdom upon earth. Shavua Tov.